On today's show, the Capitals down the Kings because Alex Ovechkin found his scoring touch and Charlie Lindgren was a brick wall in net.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Capitals did it. They got back into the win column with a nice 2-1 victory over the Kings. And you might be thinking to yourself, Dan, a statement win, a 2-1 win, is that a statement win? Well, yes, it is. If you take a look at the Kings, last I checked, they were in first place out west there and coming off a 4-game winning streak and really good on the road. So, yes, I am going to say a statement win over a really good team. I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about the Great Eight. It's starting to heat up. Has he found his scoring touch? Or is it really kind of too early to say that? And then in the final segment, we'll talk about the rumor mill that surrounds Tage Thompson and potentially the Capitals. At least that is the rumor from one Elliot Friedman. But just to get it going here, I love doing these shows all the time, but more specifically, I like doing them when I can talk to you about a Capitals victory. And what we saw tonight was, it was nice, right? A pleasant surprise. And the feeling, surrounding this team, the way it's constructed, the way they finished last season, it just felt like it was going to happen at some time. At some point, the dam was going to break and they were going to win games. And I've been let down. My hopes kind of went up with the Blues and then it got deflated. And it went up when they, had that statement win over Carolina and then it was let down. So I'm up again. And I think it's ultimately up to the Capitals to let us fans know, to let the NHL at large know, to let the team know, are they for real now? Can they finally go about winning games? And I understand they're not going to win the rest of them or anything like that, but to start to string together victories, kind of a sign to us that, yes, we know how to win hockey games. Because until then, kind of color me skeptical. I've seen that before. But what we saw tonight was encouraging. We see Alex Ovechkin scoring yet another goal, a career goal number 903. And you're thinking to yourself, as Alex Ovechkin goes, so go the Capitals. I oftentimes say that. That is his 6th goal of the season. A far cry, of course, where we thought that he was going to be. And then the other big story, I guess I was a bit surprised, I mean, to a certain extent anyway, that it was Charlie Lindgren in net. And I'm here to tell you, when this guy puts his mind to it, he is next level, saving 30 of 31. And I think the thing of it is, in what was said by Spencer Carbery, is that they wanted him to get some work in, because we know of a stretch of games coming up here in a couple of days, that we didn't want the rust to be too heavy on Chucky. And I think kind of a game, I think it was a vote of confidence for Chucky, really, that, they didn't give him an easy opponent. I mean, the Kings are for real this year, at least as of right now. So it was really reassuring. And, what we saw from him tonight was really good because, they threw the kitchen sink at him and he was able to to really kind of just button it down for the Capitals. So just a really feel-good game, all things considered. And the way this game started, and I'm talking the offense was in the most unpredictable way. I never had that Matt Roy was going to open the scoring for the Capitals, but there he is. It was Wilson to Protas, and all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, what is Matt Roy doing near the net front? And then part of me is like, I don't care. It was kind of an odd like deflection. It looked like it either bounced off his skate or his stick, but in any event, it looked like it went kind of between his skates there, and it found the back of the net. I guess it doesn't really matter the here or there. It went in. And one of the things, and I think it's all about mind games, that, the Capitals scoring that first goal that built the confidence. And I think this team is angry, or has a chip on its shoulder, because they know that primarily it's the same locker room that it was last year, that we have it within this locker room to get it done. And that is ultimately what they did. So like I said, Ovechkin scoring his 6th goal of the season, but Kopitar scoring on the PPG definitely had me feeling that, what's going to happen here? Are they going to find a way to tie it? Because like I said, we know that the Kings have been playing well as of late, and more specifically playing well on the road. So that's the big question here, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in the second segment as we talk in this episode. Is Ovechkin, is he heating up here? And that's the thing. And, one of the things about it is that, and it's kind of unexplainable, is that why certain, goal scorers have such luck against either certain netminders, certain teams, or certain venues. Well, as it turns out, Alex Ovechkin knows how to score on Darcy Kemper, former Capital. And, Darcy Kemper, kind of, it wasn't thought too highly of within the Capitals, has been playing rather well for the Kings. In any event, Alex Ovechkin finds Twine and beats him. And that's the big thing. And I think it's good for Ovechkin, because I think that there's a lot of people thinking like, hey, 40 years old, 21st season in the league, maybe you should really think about hanging this up, or maybe you should have done it earlier. But in any event, it was a reassuring moment. And, of course, the things that we notice in the game in particular are the, the goals that are scored, right? The goal scores, the great saves by the netminder. But in this game, creating offense, you take a look at Alexei Protas, you take a look at Tom Wilson. They were out there generating some grade A chances. And Tom Wilson, looking fully engaged, that ultimately, that's the guy. That's the guy to lead this team once Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates, whenever that might be. But you take a look at it, like I say, generating a lot of opportunities out there. Tom Wilson, 5 shots on goal. And of course, Alexei Protas out there, a shot on goal and an assist that, looked really good. And the other thing, of course, and if you're watching the game, of course, that the lines were different in this game, right? That first line, Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael; second line, Protas, Sortif, Wilson; and third line, Beauvillier, Dowd, and Leonard. Fourth line, Duhaime, LaPierre, and Frank. And of course, surprise, surprise, you broke them up. Dowd and Duhaime that is. And all things considered, I think that the third line looked pretty well. And ultimately, after the game, one of the things that Spencer Carbery spoke about was that he is trying to facilitate it where Ryan Leonard can score more goals. That, if you put him on a line with a center like Nick Dowd, maybe he's the guy to kind of jumpstart Ryan Leonard's offense. But all things considered, looked good. I thought that Justin Sortif looked good as well. You can see his confidence building. And, it's kind of one of those things, that, and I talked about before the season even started, that, where these guys are penciled in to start the season oftentimes really doesn't matter. Because if you would have told me, or I would have told you, that Sortif was going to be the second line center for this team, when initially he was penciled in to be, and was, the fourth line right wing, that you probably would not have believed me. But all things considered, I think that, he's starting to gain more confidence. And that is because Spencer Carbery is putting him in more high leverage situations. You don't put anybody on that second line center position. That was PLD's job, right? That, quite a vote of confidence. And it's all the mind games. It's all mental. And it has way more of an impact on the game than many people think. That the Capitals struggled when they lost. Then you win a game, it's restored. Same things with players. You think back a couple seasons when Anthony Mantha was snake bitten and Alex Ovechkin a couple seasons ago, that, a guy like Spencer Carbery comes in here, just meets you, talks to you like a man, right? And has confidence and like, I believe in you and the player, and just the confidence from your head coach. That's the mental aspect. They didn't do anything except the mental acceptance that I believe in you. And I think for a guy like that's it, like head coach has put me in at second line center. That's a big deal. So I expect to see, more from him. And, he's between two big bodies in Protas and Wilson. And also McMichael's good, adding some wheels to that first line as well. So I like what Spencer Carbery has done, despite what we saw and read in an interview that he didn't plan on making any big changes. Maybe he listens to this podcast. If you do, hi, Spencer. Thank you for listening. But in any event, mixing up those lines to get some production. And, you take a look at the score, 2-1. It's not like they set the world ablaze, but, they took down a really good Kings team. What I want to see, that's just a building block, right? For me to believe that this team is for real and they're finally out of this muck, this mire that has followed them all season long, is for them to string together some really nice wins. Because who do we got on deck? We have the Oilers. We have the Canadiens. These kind of teams. And, the Oilers, always kind of the favored to do a lot of great things and have a ton of firepower. Another good test for this team. And the Canadiens as well, another good test. So it's not going to be easy for the Capitals, nor do I want it to be. I want this team to be put through its paces to prove to themselves, to the coaches, to the fans that they're for real. This team won the Metro. This team won the Eastern Conference. By and large, the same players. Some small subtractions. I know Mangiapane put up some pretty good goals for the Capitals last season, and Taylor Radish, not so much, doing good for the Rangers. But all things considered, the nucleus is here. This team can do it. It's going to be up to this team to pick itself up by the bootstraps and pull themselves up the standings. And hopefully we can talk about the Capitals being in contention yet again. All right, so coming up here after the break is Alex Ovechkin heating up. It's easy to say that, but only 6 goals on the season so far. Is he for real? I'll discuss next. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And now listen, if you're a fan of the Wizards or whatever team in the NBA, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I want to thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So talking Ovi, talking the great 8 here in the second segment. Is he for real? Is he arrived? As Alex Ovechkin goes, so go the Capitals. Well, is he here? Is this sustainable? Or is it going to dry up here? Generally speaking, painting it with a broad brush, that once that switch is flipped, usually that's a sign that, he's figured out, he's got that mojo going. He's feeling confident. And the thing I like about Ovechkin and what we've seen from him in the goals scored as of late is it's a little unpredictable. And just maybe that's a part of the secret sauce of his current success, that he's not that one trick pony, that we had perceived him from. You know what I'm talking about? Left dot, you could book it. That was his office. They don't call it an office for no reason. And the thing I like about it, he's getting an assist. And in a lot of ways, I think kind of more well-rounded. I know that you take a look at the 6 goals on the season and you think should have scored a lot more. And touche, that's true. But I think that he's ramping up, and I think that his confidence has been restored. So let's talk about that here in the second segment here. And usually, like I say, when he heats up, the whole team is more dangerous. And what does it do? It forces defenses to shift. It forces goalies to freeze. It forces matchups to get uncomfortable, and it opens the door for the rest of the top 6. And, that was the thing. You saw him feed that goal to Connor McMichael, that everybody thought Alex Ovechkin was going to shoot it because, well, duh, that's what he does. Feeds the puck to Connor McMichael. He finds the back of the net. And that's the story right there, that he is turning into, always has been, but more of a diverse player. So what changed? Ovi's legs looked cooked. He was attacking the middle of the ice, not just hanging around the boards. He was getting shots through bodies. He was winning small space battles. He was reading the play earlier than he has in weeks. And that goal, classic Ovi chaos, shot through screens, rebound finished, defenders leaning his way. And when that starts happening, Ovi's confidence begins to snowball. And once he's dangerous, everything else opens up for his line mates, right? And it opens, just the opportunities for other players to score. Just his line mates. As of right now, it's Strome and McMichael. But I think that, when he's scoring, it's contagious. You see Tom Wilson and these kind of guys score more goals as well. So it's definitely an intriguing storyline to follow. I guess I'm going to reserve kind of as, a wait and see if in fact he can continue to keep scoring. But how Ovi affects the entire structure: when Ovi is a threat, defenders sag around him, slots open up for follow-up shooters, and power play lanes open. Coaches can deploy him more aggressively, and opposing teams change their neutral zone shape because they understand the real threat that is the Great 8. And, still 40 years old, or now 40 years old, shall I say. He's been doing this a long time, that he's still lethal, and that's something, because oftentimes you see a depreciation or a player not as good as they were in their younger day. And then you saw it in the game. In the second period, he nearly picked off a neutral zone pass and created a 2-on-1. That's vintage Ovi hockey. In the third, after scoring, Kings defenders started collapsing on him early. That gave Leonard, Protas, McMichael extra touches, and that is the ripple effect. So what's the short-term impact? If Ovi stays hot, the top 6 becomes legitimately scary. The power play wakes up. We're still waiting for that. And the Caps gain margin for error in tight games like the one we saw tonight. Again, Chucky deserves a lot of the credit, but also, the goal scoring that did show up. Again, Matt Roy, wow. I don't want to think too much about it, but yes, Matt Roy. And then Alex Ovechkin, of course, that put them in a good position. So the long-term impact, if this is Ovi finding a rhythm, the Caps playoff chase looks different. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's much too early to say, but what I want to do is live in the here, right now, and Ovechkin is playing better, right? And when Ovechkin is playing better, usually the Capitals play better. And it's going to be a fun thing to watch. And it's going to be interesting to see how those lines shake out in the next game as well, as we saw some good. And like I said, the fourth line, spent a lot of time on the bench. So I still think there is some tinkering that needs to take place. But as far as Alex Ovechkin, I think he is starting to heat up. But I don't want to be looking at him with Capitals colored glasses on. I guess I'll reserve my judgment if he can continue to keep doing this. Maybe a multi-goal game, maybe a hat trick, something for me to believe. Yes, the Great Eight is back again. That is my hope anyway. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about an intriguing storyline, and it emanates from a very familiar source. I'm talking to Elliotte Friedman from the 32 Thoughts podcast and Sportsnet up there in Canada. What did he have to say about Tage Thompson and the Capitals? I'll discuss next. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back into the moments that matter. So I love my life. I want you to love your life as well. And you can do that with the confidence that Rougiette provides. Now visit RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use code LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And join me one and all for the Locked On Capitals Insiders. You'll get Capitals news delivered in the form of a text message from yours truly. There's more information in the show notes. So in the final segment of today's show, we're talking about the rumblings, rumble about, moves that the Capitals need to make. And I think it's quite apparent to everybody, and especially the premier insiders. I'm going to go ahead and say, like Elliotte Friedman, a guy who has covered the NHL for a long time, is very plugged in as far as rumors and trades and all that is concerned. And the talk out there about Tage Thompson. Yes, Tage Thompson. And would he be a good fit in DC? It's definitely a storyline to follow. So let's dive into that in the final segment of today's show. And, an intriguing name, that's for sure. Elliotte Friedman mentioned that Buffalo may listen to offers on Tage Thompson, not shop him, not push him, just listen. And what I was hearing is this wasn't necessarily on his 32 Thoughts podcast. This was more of him, but he was talking about this more than once. This was up in Canada there on Sportsnet and different radio outlets, drawing connections with the Capitals. And to be honest with you, was not a name that I had drawn. If you're an everydayer, you know the names that I talked about earlier, but I'm loving it if it is a Tage Thompson deal. Now, whenever a top-line unicorn-type center hits even the outskirts of the rumor mill, you pay attention. And you don't ignore it. You don't pretend it doesn't matter. You don't hang up the phone. You at least listen. And ultimately, why should the Capitals care? Well, Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be out for 3 to 4 months. We're talking springtime here, folks. And, they won tonight, but I still think they are missing, that giddy up in their step, their goal scoring, that I think a player like Tage Thompson could provide. A little bit later in the segment here, I'll talk about what, something like that would look like. But the Caps are in a transition window. They need to think about the post-Ovechkin era. And not even that far. They need to think about the 25-26 season. And they need a centerpiece moving forward. And Tage Thompson definitely trends is exactly that type of guy. 6'6", elite shot, play driver, long-term contract at a reasonable number. He's having a down season, but it should come as no surprise that the Sabres are going to saber. They always do. And this is where smart GMs start to look around. So the question, of course, is should the Capitals make an offer? And if you're asking me, and I don't want it to come to this, but, Chris Patrick's been here for a little bit, and he has not really put his stamp on this organization yet. And, he's, there's been extensions out there, I'm talking Chikrin and Logan Thompson and Faravari, these kind of things. But to make a move of this nature would show to the Capitals fans that I am for real. And I don't want it to be about that, but it would definitely show me as a fan of the team at the end of the day, as someone that covers this team, the kind of pull that a guy like Chris Patrick has. So should the Capitals make an offer, not reckless, not desperate, but yes, they should be in the conversation because you don't find guys like this on the market too often. If the price is reasonable, you consider it. If the price is insane, you walk. Simple. Now, where it gets a bit murky is what is a reasonable cost, right? That, oftentimes people hear someone of that caliber and they're like, yes, I've got the deal. I think that the Capitals should trade, Hendrix LaPierre and Justin Sordiff and bring him here. No, this guy is elite. And Buffalo, despite where they are in the standings, they're not fools. They're not run by fools. They are still, at the end of the day, a team in the NHL. So what would it cost? I'm not going to lie to you, a lot. Probably a first-round pick, a blue-chip prospect, maybe a roster player, but you don't know until you talk. Is it a first-rounder? Is it multiple draft picks? Is it, a prospect? Is it, it could be any mix and match of things, but it's going to cost a lot. I'm going to go ahead and say, if you're asking me, a roster player and a couple draft picks, and it's just kind of throwing a dart at the wall, but that's what it's going to take to kind of pull a player like this. And the Cap should talk, because even gathering intel matters. Knowing his price helps you evaluate your own players. Because the thing of it is, and I don't want to be, the team that's kicking the can down the road, this win now mode that this team has been guilty of for so many years. But with that said, like, I said earlier in this segment that we're talking about Ovechkin very well stepping away from hockey. And who is going to be the faces of this team? And again, I don't even want to make it that far down. I don't want to crumple up and throw away the 25-26 season. And I understand we're not in that position, but it could go that way if we don't address the deficiencies on this team. But if a deal never happens, fine. No harm in listening. But if there's even a tiny chance to land a franchise center, then you take the call. Because that's the thing, the Capitals winning a game tonight is good. I'm on the roller coaster of the 25-26 season. Yay! They won the game tonight against the Kings and then down and up. They beat the Blues and then down and up, and they beat the Hurricanes and down. Usually if a team is really good, you're not getting so sick from riding on the roller coaster that is the Capitals 25-26 season. We are at the quarter point mark of the season. So we can't rest on, it's still early. It is still early-ish. But I think if the Capitals could acquire, a Tage Thompson player or a Tage Thompson-esque type player, I definitely think that could be the jolt that this team needs. I think they need some outside blood. I'm not talking about the recycle bin, like we've seen in the past, like Vrana, or I even heard some people saying before, earlier that they should bring Kuznetsov back. I'm like, you guys are mad. But in any event, I think that some new blood, a guy like Tage Thompson, who's not just, a stopgap measure, an elite level player, could definitely change the fortunes of this team and could be part of the missing ingredient. I mean, look at, even a couple summers ago when they acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois, that was met with quite a bit of skepticism. But in his first year with the Capitals was an absolute game changer. The true bad news in the whole situation is that he's injured and is going to miss a lion's share of this season. So the Capitals do need to plan ahead. And it's not even about years to come. It's even about this season as well. Do the Capitals have what it takes? Does Chris Patrick have what it takes? I think he's got to prove himself to us at the end of the day. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. And for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.